just going to introduce both of our speakers about the CommonCore state standards. Is that right? CCSS? I had the pleasure of learning quite a bit about it when I had to introduce it, but I certainly didn't learn as much as I need or want to, so I'm looking forward also to today's presenters. And they are Paul Carr, taught in Korea, American Samoa, Western Samoa, England, and Connecticut. He was the 2009 North Monterey County LULAC Teacher of the Year. He has been published in Teacher Magazine, Education Weekly, the San Francisco Chronicle, the New York Post, the Christian Science Monitor, Huffington Post, and in 14 editions of Chicken Soup for the Soul. I didn't get to ask you about that. I have a couple editions. He's been interviewed by CNN, First Edition, and APR, The Story with Dick Gordon. He writes a column for the Salinas Californian and teaches 5th grade at Castroville Elementary School. He is going to begin, but I'm going to also go ahead and introduce Dr. Mary White. She works as the Associate Superintendent of Educator Services at Monterey County Office of Education. She has over 25 years of K-12 experience working in the field of transformational leadership. Mary has a record of professional success turning around low-performing schools towards high level of academic achievement based on the principles of results-driven leadership. Before working for the County Office of Education, Mary was principal at Seaside High School and worked her magic of turning around things there. I hear from my friends who are still at Seaside High School. My husband and I both retired from Seaside High School before Mary came. So thank you very much for being here. There will be questions at the end of both presentations, and Janet will take the questions. So if you have some, jot them down somewhere so you can remember. And we're going to start with Paul.
So I'm the anti-CommonCore part of this, and it's General Petraeus and General Bolger both have said it's a lot easier to attack than it is to build. So I think my job is going to be a little easier than Mary's, and sort of in a way not fair. So anyway, that's a bone I just threw away, Mary. Okay. So and we're supposed to play nice, so I'm playing nice. Thank you very much for having me come here. I have 3 personal days, and I got to have one off today, so that's nice. And this is really, I love education, and for those of you who have read my columns, I think you kind of know I'm passionate, so here goes. Fittingly today on the Wall Street Journal, on page 3, it began with an article, CommonCore Contracts, the Fights Begin. And it was about contract rigging in Massachusetts, it was about single bidder issues with the Pearson Company in New York, and it was about bidding review sidestepping, which was supposed to occur, and it has not in Mississippi. For those who are opposed to CommonCore, it is a debate about whether or not we need standards. We do. Schools should improve. That's a given. Rather, opponents, like myself, ask whether or not the CommonCore standards are so remarkable and so sound that we should embrace them as standards by which every single American child is both educated and judged. And it's interesting because a lot of the people who have come out against CommonCore are those who know it the best. And so Louisa Moats, one of the few early childhood experts on the team that created the literacy standards, is now one of the most outspoken critics. Why? Because she says the CommonCore standards disregard decades of research on early reading development and instead yank up difficulty levels at every grade. The CommonCore standards were built backwards from grade 12 down to pre-K. And she says kids don't grow backwards, they grow forward, and their development is unique and uneven. Currently, CommonCore requires that kindergartners count from 1 to 100 by ones and tens. But they can't do that. And even though we know that most 5-year-olds can only count to 20, this is as silly of an expectation as it is expecting all 2-year-olds to be potty trained. or to get my daughter to come home before 12 when she goes out on a date, you know? All right, so, and there's absolutely no evidence, none, that the Common Core standards and its tests will actually increase student learning. And as we engage in this experiment, Common Core, we may very well hurt the kids who need our support the most. We are embracing a set of flawed standards that will mark as failure more than half of our kids. And I don't know about any of you, but I always loved the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And one of my favorite lines in that was, you know, they blew up the train, they steal the money, and they take off, and they go, and they're pursued, and they go, who are those guys? Who are those guys? You know, they're always after them. So the question is a really good one to ask about Common Core, too. Who are those guys? And so who started Common Core? David Coleman, all right? So who's David Coleman? He's smart and he's athletic enough to get a Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford University, yet he never had a teaching job. And what does he do? He works his connections to leverage his way to write the National English Standards. He shuts out any open inquiry and discussion of the Common Core process. Participants are required to sign non-disclosure agreements, agreeing not to disclose any writing or discussion on the creation of the process. And what's his payoff? He sells his assessment company, which is called Grow Network, for a cool $14 million. Then he gets picked up by the College Board to be president, allowing him to continue his plan to direct English education, all the while having no teaching experience or supervision training. And now he's become positioned to rewrite the SATs to fit his Common Core concept. So you're making the SAT fit Common Core. This is all from a man who could not get hired as a teacher and who has publicly used profanity to ridicule students' personal expression. All right, so then I would say, the many promises of Common Core are wordy abstractions, they're ephemeral posturing, and optimistic delusion. They're unsubstantiated. But the questions posed to those abstractions are real, and they go unanswered. And I will ask many of those questions in a minute. And so loud, repeated assertions do not make facts. And Mark Twain says this, I just love this. Noise proves nothing. Often a chicken who has merely laid an egg cackles as if she laid an asteroid. So, which is appropriate, right? Because we're going to land on an asteroid. What's today? I think today they land on the asteroid. Originally, I'm from Connecticut. Connecticut has really high educational standards. They're probably, unarguably, the two states with the highest standards are Massachusetts and Connecticut for a variety of reasons. But anyway, I really have a lot of respect for superintendents who have come out against Common Core because that is a hard thing to do. They're not paid to do that. Anyway, Tom Scarise is the superintendent of Madison, Connecticut Public Schools, which is the Gold Coast. If you're on the west coast of Connecticut, that's the Gold Coast, right next to New York. So anyway, so he's in basically a Carmel school system. So he writes that the campaign for Common Core has been waged with fear tactics, mainly the fear that other nations have higher scores and will therefore beat us. And what he's referring to is PISA. And PISA is a program for international student assessment. And if you've seen any of the screaming and hollering in the past years or so, they're going, oh, the American scores are low, American scores are low. Finland, South Korea, Japan, and Singapore, and Shanghai are higher than we are. Well, first of all, I think many of you have talked to a few of your educators, and you would know that Shanghai's not a country. Shanghai is a city. How can that even be in that comparison? So if we put Shanghai is the Manhattan of China. If you're in China, you want to go to Shanghai. So we should have Manhattan in that mix. Yeah, no, it's an unequitable comparison. I taught in Korea. In all of Northern Asia and most of Asia, you don't have special ed kids in your public schools. They're not there. They are just not there. Anyway, so it's a false comparison. So anyway, Mr. Scarise cites a Chinese national who's the president chair and associate dean of global education, University of Oregon College of Education, and his name is Young Zhao. Young Zhao is like one of my favorite people. I love Diane Ravitch and Young Zhao. Young Zhao is scholarly, and this is what Young Zhao says. There is no connection between test scores and economic growth. There's none. So don't say PISA matters. It's a false assertion to begin with. And then secondly, those who support Common Core but they say, well, maybe you're against the implementation of Common Core. Yeah, I'm against that too. But Young Zhao says, reducing the debate of Common Core to a matter of implementation is intellectually weak. because it's a fudging, it's a distraction. A number of other matters remain unresolved. The standards, this is Diane Ravitch's mantra, the standards have never been field tested with actual students. And CommonCore, this is a new thing in the United States, which is really frightening. CommonCore has been largely influenced through massive donations via powerful philanthropic organizations such as the Gates Foundation. Bill Gates has donated $350 million to promote CommonCore. And I don't know if any of you remember, but about a decade ago, Bill Gates was also the guy that promoted the small schools. And this was a resounding failure. And everybody jumped on the bandwagon. And I remember seeing maybe 6, 7 months ago, his wife Melinda was on the Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, and he brought that up to her. And she said something that just rung in my ears, and it really bothered me. He said, so what about the smaller schools whole program? And she said, well, we're learning. I have trouble with that pronoun, we. No, I'm serious. I mean, she's not an educator. Bill's not an educator. They're not educators. Anyway, okay, so Young Zhao says, CommonCore has been largely influenced through massive donations via powerful philanthropic organizations such as the Gates Foundation, creating a chilling question about the consequential influence of one billionaire on an educational system. Since when? Since when do a few wealthy people decide to get how we're going to run our educational system? And they're not even educators to boot. Anyway, questions then also about whether or not the standards are appropriate for our youngest and most fragile learners have been raised by over 500 nationally recognized early childhood experts. And they're the ones who say kindergartners don't learn how to count to 100 by ones and by tens. All right? Categorically, no evidence exists to support the stance that CommonCore will raise the achievement of our most impoverished students. And once again, you know, education is much too complex to reduce our work to another futile silver bullet. And quite often what happens in education reminds me of preschoolers looking for Easter eggs. You have 50 preschoolers looking for Easter eggs, and Susie finds an Easter egg over there. And everybody, the kids go, oh, Easter egg! They run over there. Then Juan finds a chocolate bunny over here. And they all run over there, you know? And so it is with, there's quite a few educators in here. You know how we've been punished. It's just, silver bullet. So it makes me really sad. So the superintendent says, Connecticut has high academic standards for decades, academic standards developed by educational professionals and embraced by educators. They serve to set clear expectations for accountability for learning and form the basis of curriculum. However, the rigidity of CommonCore, mandating that every and each student achieve the same learning expression, regardless of learning style and individual profile, this is an absurdity. Anyway, let me jump ahead. All right, so Young Zhao, I love him. Young Zhao says, it is impossible, unnecessary, and harmful for a small group of individuals to predetermine and impose upon all students the same set of knowledge and skills and expect that all students progress at the same pace. I love this. Sorry. I am not against standards per se, for good standards can serve as a useful guide. What I am against is common and core. All right? That is the same standards for all students in a few subjects currently. I mean, we're all just doing math and English, math and English. It's math and English in elementary to the loss of everything else. Diane Ravitch calls that the curriculum narrowing. And as the core of all children's educational diet, Young Zhao says, I might even love CommonCore if they were not common or core. All right, proponents say, but now it's more important than ever to figure out what young people need to know. Now. Okay, Young Zhao says, garbage. He says, over 150 years ago, British philosopher Herbert Spencer thought it was so important to decide what children should learn. He wrote his essay, What Knowledge is of Most Worth? And he came up with the answer. Science. Funny, we're not doing that in elementary anymore. We don't do science. In 1892, the NEA, National Education Association, thought it was so important to figure out what mattered that it appointed the Committee of 10, chaired by Harvard President Charles Eliot, so they could figure out what schools to teach. In the early 1900s, the NEA had another commission to rethink the curriculum and came up with the cardinal principles of secondary education. Point being, it's constant. It's not now. Now's really not any different than any other time. And Young Zhao says, there has never been a lack of attempts to figure out what all young people should know and be able to do. Consequently, there is no shortage of standards around. The fact that there have been so many attempts actually suggests the difficulty of the task. And if those, well, I'm sorry, those of you who are teachers can know, it's really an art. It's an art, okay? People simply cannot seem to agree what all children should know and learn in general. People cannot even agree what to teach in math, supposedly the most straightforward subjects, and have fought many math wars. Oh my God. So like Mathlands, Math My Way, New Math, Old Math, expressions, on and on and on, right? So, okay, it is actually a good thing in my mind that people cannot come to agreement, and the American federal government was not given authority to impose its own version upon all children. But despite the lack of consistently implemented national curriculum and standards, America did just fine. The U.S. has had a decentralized education system forever, previous to Bush and Obama. And it has become one of the most prosperous, innovative, and democratic nations on earth. The lack of a common prescription of content imposed on all children by the government has not been a vice. Rather, it's a virtue. And as Harvard economists Claudia Golden and Lawrence Katz wrote in their book, The Race Between Education and Technology, we have to shed our collective amnesia. America was once the world's educational leader. The rest of the world imported its institutions and egalitarian ideas from us. That alone is a great achievement, and one which calls for an encore. Okay? So now we'll get into specifics. The specific problems with CommonCore. Don't be fooled by the claims of CommonCore's advocates. CommonCore will not make your children ready for college or a career. The future needs passionate, creative, collaborative innovators, not compliant, uniform test takers. CommonCore will not help disadvantaged children do better. Don't narrow your curriculum. Right, in my own school, I don't know about you, when I went to school, we had band, we had art, we had PE, we had science. We don't have these things anymore. At my school, we do only because we have a school improvement grant, which ends this year. Okay, so don't cut arts, music, sports, recess, field trips, debate teams, or other programs in order to align with the CommonCore. By the way, I'm going to use that word align later on. Nothing is more core than a child's interest and passion. Don't standardize teachers. The most powerful and effective teachers are those who inspire and motivate their students. Don't waste money on CommonCore and its many products. By the way, right now there's a feeding frenzy through all the publishers with CommonCore. And if any of you have any work done on your house, any construction at all, the magic word is green. If it's green, it's good. You put green in, because it's ecologically sound. Well, the new magic word for publishing and education is aligned with CommonCore. So if you print a book and you say this is aligned with CommonCore, you are potentially in the pipeline. Also, big problem is what gets tested is what gets taught. So that wasn't the goal of No Child Left Behind, which is the ugly stepsister to this, but that is what happens. CommonCore standards will be tremendously difficult adjustment for teachers and students initially. CommonCore standards will cause many outstanding teachers and administrators to pursue other career options. CommonCore standards are vague and broad. CommonCore standards will require young students to learn more at a quicker pace than they ever had before. CommonCore will not have an equivalency test for students with special needs. Currently, if you have special ed kids in your school, there's a small percentage of them, their scores don't count on the assessment. So, and schools are evaluated by that, which you'll see in a minute. CommonCore standards could be watered down compared to the few states who have high standards, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and North Dakota. CommonCore standards will lead many textbooks to be obsolete. Oh, don't get me going on that. CommonCore standards will cost money to update technology. All right, we had to do report cards this week, and we're doing conferences, and everything's techie, techie, techie. America's solution to quite a bit is technology. Those of you who lived through the Vietnam era, right, we're going to bomb them back into the Stone Age. That didn't happen. And so this is like the fix for everything now. And no one could get their report cards this week because a company that we do it through, Illuminate, couldn't do our report cards. And if the electricity went out now, I couldn't show this to you. And this is like $1,400 for this. And they have a huge scandal just now in LA where they spent $1 billion on laptops for kids. And it was really obscene. CommonCore will lead to an increased value on standardized test performance. That's one of my greatest problems with this. CommonCore testing, they're not separate, they are the same. So I'd like to end with this. It's Louis C.K., he's a comedian, and he's interviewed by David Letterman.
How are your daughters? Tell me about them.
They're great. The youngest one just turned 9, and then the older one remains 12 for a few more months. And they're good. I mean, this week is testing week at schools.
I hear a lot about that. Yep.
Yeah, so they're in 3 days of extensive standardized testing.
And what are the consequences of the standardized testing?
Well, the way I understand it, if a school's kids don't test well, they burn the school down. So it's pretty high pressure.
A lot of pressure on the kids.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the tests are written by people that nobody knows who they are. It's very secretive. And the questions are, because they have to prepare for these tests for a long time. A lot of the year is about the tests.
Teaching for the test.
Teaching to the test, they call it, because they decided there's a new way kids should think, and we're going to prove they're thinking it by having them pass these tests, or we burn the school down. So anyway, my kids kind of panic when they're in these, which is okay. You know, my mother was a math teacher, and she taught me that moment where you go, I don't know what this is when you panic. That means you're about to figure it out. That means you've let go of what you know, and you're about to grab onto a new thing.
That's great.
That you didn't know yet. So I'm there for them in those moments, and I go, come on, just look at the problem. And then I look at the problems, and it's like, Bill has 3 goldfish. He buys 2 more. How many dogs live in London? Or something like that.
Thank you, okay?
My name is Mary White. I work at the Monterey County Office of Education. I've been there for 2 years as the Associate Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. My whole life has really been deeply immersed. I'm hitting almost 30 years, since I was 20 years old, working in education as an elementary teacher, as a middle school teacher, as a principal. Then I went back and raised my kids, got them to kindergarten, and back into teaching. The highest at-risk students at Hardin Middle School, and I said I'll never be a principal again. But then it just kind of, leadership just kind of eats at you, and my husband laughed at me when I went back into, when my kids were in kindergarten. My kids are 15 months apart. I live in Prunedale. And I went back into administration and worked my way to my most personally transformational experience has been at Seaside High School. And it is seen really the absolute importance for equity and access to education for all children. And so I am a firm believer in the Common Core. Why am I a firm believer in the Common Core? Because I think we have to have common standards. There is no hospital that I will ever walk into if doctors don't have some agreements as to what are the highest levels of medical care, medical treatment, and unite around that. I pick my doctors on the best artists of the industry. But I first of all want to have a technician, a specialist over the area that I'm choosing. And I don't know any field that doesn't have the highest of standards. So the Common Core state standards are a set of high-quality academic expectations in English language arts and mathematics. And I read this because it's an important key definition that define the knowledge and skills all students should master by the end of each grade level in order to be on track for success in college and career. We want, and it's no joke, we want students ready for college and career. And that doesn't magically happen. And it does happen by having very, very high standards. But it's not a one-size-fits-all. At Seaside High School, nothing. We had 1,300 students, and nothing was one-size-fits-all. But I'm going to tell you, if we want to offer equity and access to students, we've got to have the highest quality education for them. My 2 children are at Seaside High School. I have a sophomore and a junior. And their equity and access is different than the student whose parents just came to the United States 2 years ago and are living in a house with 3 different families and are trying to learn English. But that child in Seaside High School, and it's happening today, deserves that same access to college and career. It looks different. We have 46 states and Washington, D.C. who have adopted the Common Core state standards. And I want to put in parentheses, I don't come here trying to convince everyone. because I don't want to see Common Core as a battle. I think a battlefield is distracting to the people in the field, to the people doing the real work, which are teachers and administrators, and mostly for our children. When you look at a 9-12 education, grade 9 through 12, it goes by like that. And children do get left behind. If there isn't someone there that says, you, Jose, you can be a doctor. And Maria, and Shirley, and Thomas, you can be what you want to be. The tools are, you've got to know some stuff. You've got to be able to write. You've got to be able to read. You've got to be able to express yourself. We need the Common Core state standards because across our nation, it's not okay that from state to state, the standard that is set is different. It can be high, it can be low, it depends on what politics says and legislators say and districts say. There's no equity and access there. Across the nation, our districts, prior to this big event of trying to create a common understanding of what standards are, every state, every district, every school ends up doing something different. Common Core state standards are very important because what our students need to be receiving is the highest quality instruction. The difference is the Common Core state standard is not the end game. It's a standard. I can't wait to go back into education because as a teacher, I would have the standard, but I get to be the great teacher that I am, but I know what I'm aiming for. There is a very, very strong emphasis on college and career readiness. That's the end game. And there are standards grade level by grade level that interlap and are interwoven, and it's looking for what does it take to build and support the successful student. Education in the US economy, I'm telling you, I am no economist. But when I go into a hardware store and I need to buy something and the cashier can't, if I say, I need these two things, what's the tax on that going to be? And they can't add it up without going to their little computer. There's a problem. There's a problem. We need to have, no matter if it's a Harvard grad or a Yale grad or a grad from a trade school, we need to have students and adults who are highly competent. So we look at where is our unemployment rate coming from? Look up here at the chart. The unemployment rate is coming from those that have the lowest education, those that don't have a college and career education. And that has a huge impact on our economy and on the salaries that are given out to those with the highest education. They're making the greatest income. And those that aren't, they are, and these are kind of broad brush statements, they are being left behind. And their children are being left behind. And their children's children are being left behind. The Common Core state standards is going to be very, very difficult for us as a nation to put our arms around. But to have common expectations of the highest standards of learning to be successful in 21st century, which I'm sorry, it does include technology. To be technologically literate, key, critical. We see that the demands on the US labor market and the global economy, 63% of all US jobs will require at least some college education. Some college education. I don't believe that every student is meant to graduate from a four-year college. I do believe that every student should have the choice. Do I want to follow a career pathway that is a non-four-year institution? Do I want to go to a trade school? What we want is a society where everyone in our public education has that opportunity. I have two kids, 16 months apart, dinner table each night, and I listen to what's going on in their classrooms. I love what's going on in their classrooms. Seaside High has done a great job with instructional strategies, but they take 8 classes each. It's 16 different conversations until we get teachers to unite around what are our common expectations for English language arts, for math, for writing, for expression. We are a nation in crisis. And I think we need to embrace that crisis as a community. Any school that I've been in, I've said if we unite together, we will make success happen. If we don't unite together, our kids are going to lose out. You could have one rock star teacher in grade 5 and one that's maybe a little not so much a rock star, and that can create, and they don't know what they're doing, or they're doing separate things together, or they're creating their own magic. Magic is great, as long as where is that magic headed? Students are, in general, not prepared for the rigors of college, and we have data that supports that. Now, you can quote data anywhere. I use data just kind of to drive home the larger picture with education. We have students sitting in school that aren't feeling challenged, that they go there and they don't feel like they're really headed and driven towards their future. They're taking a class. We have 69% that are saying, gosh, my high school was to some degree easy. 30% that say it's challenging. What we're saying is, what better mind is it than a mind that every single day feels challenged? My 2 kids, I'll refer back to them. I have one girl who's a total go-getter. I don't know where she got it regarding grades, because I really wasn't the top A student. We were having this conversation in the car the other day, and she said, Mom, I've got this AP chemistry class, and it's just killing me. Now, this is a 4.3 student. I got a B in chemistry, but I love my B. So why do you love my B? This is so interesting to listen to. I love my B because every time I go to class, I learn something new, and that teacher will not give it for free, and she is challenging me. And she's the lowest grade in the class, so she's with some pretty brilliant students. She says, but I love that class. And I have to say, I love you more. Man, we just need to write that. The Fordham Institute took a look at standards, and we've got a mixed bag. And my question is that mixed bag in public education? You want to have a mixed bag, that's what private education is for. People can pay for a mixed bag. But if you want students, all students, no matter what their zip code, to have access to opportunity, mixed bag doesn't work. 25 states have moved backwards, this is what their research said, in the quality of their standards from 2005 to 2010. 21 in English standards received a D or F in terms of rigor or clarity. 18 states' mathematics standards received D or F. The vast majority of states have standards that scored lower than the Common Core. I can tell you, working with the local universities, we have some of the brightest going on to university, and they're struggling. They're struggling with written language. They're struggling with those higher level computation skills. So let's imagine.
Let's imagine we own a company, and we have 50 different stores. If each had its own goals
and objectives and approached business in different ways, would that company be able to succeed in a competitive market? So I go to McDonald's in Salinas, and because they have a manager there, they don't have to worry about how fast you get your hamburger. Or even if that bun is not toasted well, you know, it's all right. But you go to Monterey, and it's just top notch. And then but there's no real standard, and we know that doesn't happen. We know that thriving franchises come from agreements about what the highest standards are. I have spent quite a bit of time in Salinas Valley Memorial Hospital, and I learned a lot. My mom has been pretty sick over the last 10 months, and I learned a lot of some of the common struggles with organizations and institutions. But the one thing I did understand is there is a standard. There is a standard of functioning, of operating, of giving care to patients that I can refer to, that they can actually put down, and that needs to be embraced by all the professionals that are there. Why Common Core state standards? Preparation for college and career. We need to have a common understanding as a nation, and it will take us, school transformation, nation transformation, anything transformation takes 5 to 10 years. But if we stay on the course of the highest standards need to be common across the nation, we will have an understanding of what a well-prepared college student is. I go back to no matter what zip code. And I have seen some of the most heroic stories come from our children, our students, our young adults with the greatest challenges. They want to embrace challenge. They want to embrace the American dream. They want to climb out of being not privileged, is what they would call themselves. They desire it, but they need the way. And what is the standard? Competition. We do need to be able to compete nationally and internationally. And my big thing is equity. Every child in this nation, if they go in the doorstep of a public school, they need to have a baseline. It doesn't need to look the same. A baseline. Clarity, that the standards are focused, coherent, and clear. Collaboration. Collaboration is at the heart of what I think the richness of the Common Core state standards are, because we can now have a conversation, a common conversation nationwide. Could you imagine politicians having a common conversation about what we believe about our public schools? I'm going to say something that I will not repeat. I will not, I'll deny, that's a better thing. It's politics that has messed everything up. It's when you take a good concept about what children need to do, and everybody argues about it at a federal level and a state level, and Paul, you're right. A bunch of folks that have never stepped a day in the classroom, and they argue about it. And then everyone who is boots on the ground, in the field, in the trenches, is feeling like, okay, where are we headed? What are we doing? Where are resources? The 21st century skills that we're talking about, what is needed? To be successful, I know this is for me, and I'm going to believe it is for all of you, you need to be critical thinkers on your feet. You need to be empowered to be a critical thinker, to have strong communication skills, to be able to collaborate, and to be creative. The Common Core state standards is different than instruction. As a teacher, and I used to love this, and I worked with the highest at-risk students in Salinas, loved every minute of it for 6 years. And it is, I had the standards that were set out by the state at that time, but I had to creatively help those students believe they could do it. And I had to, the big buzzword, I had to differentiate before differentiation was a buzzword in education. Every learner's different. But I had to say to the young man whose mother was taken away from him, whose father was in Soledad prison, you, dude, can make something of yourself. It starts today. And then he would do all the things that people that don't believe in themselves do. And I'd say, you know, you can do that, but you're not leaving my classroom today. You're not leaving my classroom today until you embrace the fact, first of all, this needs to be done. Secondly, you can learn. Stop rejecting it. You can be successful. And I dare to say, and you can change the way your family is and what's going on in your life pattern. What the Common Core state standards do is allow us to have common beliefs around instruction in foundational skills. What are successful teaching practices? And that's the most important thing. The most important warrior we have in the room, or warrioress, is going to be the teacher. We talk forever about what goes on in schools. I will never forget, never, half my life has been a teacher in the classroom, and I will never forget the challenge it is. And so it's the teacher supporting and helping the teacher with the most effective practices. I'm going to put this in a little parentheses. If I have two good friends whose spouses have cancer, and going through somersaults of trying to get through the system to get the best treatment for their spouses. And they are looking not for someone who kind of has it or who sort of gets how to cure cancer. They want someone that's got the researched best strategies to curing the cancer. And I believe that about the classroom. And I think we neglect the conversation about how key and critical the teacher is. And that teacher needs to be supported. The teacher needs to have the solid rock of what are the standards. And as a teacher, they get to choose what best practices do I get to choose in order to inspire and engage every student in my class, no matter what the zip code. Rigor works. I'm sorry, Mary, that essay, you can do better than that. Back. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's create what you can do, what you can express. Rigorous expectations leading to 21st century learning. And so you will see that the new standards, and the focus right now is mathematics, and English language arts, they aren't brand new. Now, Michelle Monsi-Silva over here, she is actually the specialist, and she knows the content area of English language arts. I didn't think that that's what you wanted me to share with you. And I have math specialists and science specialists, and they really drill down, and what they'll say is there's nothing brand new under the sun. But our previous standards, and tell me if I'm right on this, Michelle, in content areas, they were too many. They were confusing because they were too many, and they didn't drill down to the key core foundational standards and skills that the students needed to integrate and develop in order to embrace these 21st century skills. In mathematics, I'm not going to go through this, but it's not computation. I'm sorry. You will have people who will rebel. I want Susie to learn how to add or subtract or multiply or divide. What you got to do is embrace how to solve key and critical, hard problems that lead to solutions and cures and answers to world hunger and answers to technology. And every child from every zip code needs to have that. For the English language arts, it's creating the overall whole literate person that can read, that can write, that can express themselves intelligently around all genres of literature. What else am I leaving from that, Michelle? Did I do okay on a broad brush? Thank you, Michelle. And what it takes is the K-12 educator. When we go from the politics to how do we take these high standards, it's on the shoulders of your school site principals and your teachers. And how do we do this? Oh, it's hard. It's very hard. I've done it for years with schools. We unite together. And we give our teachers, or we have conversations around what do you need to be successful. Professional development. I don't know a hospital that doesn't have doctors on an ongoing professional development plan. And it's not pick whatever you want. If you're an orthopedic surgeon, it's what's the best orthopedic strategies or practices, and let's go with that. Educator-led training support, peer-to-peer training. The one thing I want to be here, and I think you're hearing it, an advocate of the teacher. I do agree, no child left behind. It's not all as bad as they say it is, because now we know the children who have been left behind. I disagree with the methodologies, but I disagree with a bunch of kids being left behind. I disagree that a nation should be allowed to have an achievement gap. And timely student data. Together, the K-12 educator is the surgeon, the K-12 educator. The rest of us, we're just advisors to the surgery. So they need to have the best tools and instruments and information in their hands. 21st century skills, critical thinking, creativity. I believe that the CommonCore state standard classroom needs to be a very creative, ingenious, deep problem solving. You can make a mistake because that's how we invent, that's how we cure, that's how we make good things happen. Communication, collaboration. Just think if our Congress and Senate were doing these things. How different, and they were united around the standards. The classroom, and this is where it all happens. And this is the conversations that we need to be having. The best practices classroom needs to be active, engaging, developmental, holistic, challenging, social, democratic, expressive, experiential. I don't see anything in those words which at all stifle. In fact, I can't wait to go back into the classroom. I've kind of promised that's the last thing I'm going to do in my career. I've got 10 more years in education, and my husband's really happy about that. But I believe that it starts and ends with the classroom and those that touch the lives of the children. I say let freedom ring. There's a lot of conversations around stifling the artistry, stifling everything, but I believe that standards are the what. Curriculum is the how. And we as teachers have the freedom once we know the what, just like a good hospital, it's the how. I thought that this was a great little caricature of the skills and attributes of today's learner. And I lead you to what we're talking about. Let's drill it down to Monterey County. Does the child of Alisal and North Monterey County and MPUSD and Salinas City and Carmel and Pacific Grove, do they get equity of access to a common set of standards with high rigor and just have it wrapped around with best instructional strategies. So as you can see, I'm a passionate advocate of the Common Core state standards. And again, I'm not here to fight. I'm just here to say, as two kids in public school right now, and the reason my kids are at Seaside High School, inter-district transfer, is they get lessons for life that go way beyond the information they're learning, and a family that really does support all the other aspects that they need. So I thank you very much for this moment.
Thank you both for very challenging and thoughtful comments. Now we are open for questions. Jane Haynes.
Now I'm going to ask Paul, can you give us some examples of how Common Core has made you a worse teacher?
Sure. The question is, could Paul give us some examples of how Common Core has made him a worse teacher?
You can't understand Common Core unless you understand what preceded it, and that was No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top. And they are one and the same. And the most difficult part is Common Core goes hand in hand with testing. And the testing is that teachers and schools will be evaluated on the performance of the children. And some people would say that Common Core is going to give the poorest of the poor more access to education. And I don't see it that way at all. Common Core is going to cost a huge, I had 20 more minutes actually that I could talk about things. Common Core is going to cost an unbelievable amount of money, particularly for the technology portion of it. And so my poor principal and Mary as well, they have to comply. I mean, she didn't make this up. She's an advocate, that's good, but many others are not. And they have to comply with these regulations that are imposed on them by the feds and by the state. And it ends up, I'm a private in the trenches. You know, I'm shooting the bad guys on the other side. And for me, we have, like I noticed one of the things up there was best teaching practices. As the teachers get to pick the best teaching practices. We don't get to pick the best teaching practices. They are imposed on us. We have to do some things which I think are absolutely wretched. And if you have been a teacher, we've done it before. And it was flushed. And I know, so a lot of it is, and the data, I don't know if you have the bilingual program. I mean, my wife's Korean, all right? So I speak Korean poorly. I speak Samoan because I was there for 5 years. My house is like the UN of languages, and I'm a big advocate for other languages. My Spanish is good enough to get me in a fight, but not out of one, all right? But when we had the bilingual program thrown at us, the data, we found out, you know, they always have data. But you know what? It was by Krashens and Cummins were the two scholars that were the ones that had the bilingual program, and we found out later on the data was based on a Quebec model. These are Europeans, basically, you know, Quebec, France, with Canada, and such it is with this again. So anyway, that was a long sidestep. Once again, what happens is it's so frustrating. We're told that we have to do something a certain way. This is how you do it. This is good practice. And then it's flushed. There's no accounting. There's no accounting for past practice. And we have to take on a new thing, a new thing, a new thing. It's like China with a 5-year plan all the time. And this is the new plan. And there's no accountability. There's no accountability for the creators of this program. But we have to do it. It's like the soldiers in Iraq. Is it their fault that they lost the war? No, it was a bad plan. So does that help?
No, because I wanted to know how you personally are a worse teacher than you would be if you didn't have this Common Core.
Okay. All right. In the past, I had books. I had a social studies book, and I would say we've always had standards. We've always had standards. And now it's like you have to create. We have to do. I think Common Core is going to have truly, I believe, is the absolute opposite effect of what is intended. Because all the teachers everywhere in all the different schools in all the different states they're going to decide what the materials are that they use. There's not going to be standardization. It's going to be completely different. And the younger teachers with me have had no science. No science when they were in elementary. No social studies because they grew up with No Child Left Behind. And so when they come in the classroom, I find that many of them are not prepared with a science or social studies background. And I am, and I really like that. Again, I don't know if I'm answering your question. What happens is we have meetings and stuff's imposed on us that I'm really against. And just, we have to do pair share. Pair share is, I'll say 3 plus 4 is 7. Then the kids have to say 7 equals 4 plus 3. Then Jim would have to say it to the woman next to him, what's 4 plus 3? And she'll say 7 is 3 plus 4. We have to do this or we're going to be shot. Yes. Well, okay, I'll tell you the truth. When somebody's watching me, I do it. No, honest.
Allison, do you want to
I want to talk about something a little different, not what the actual standards of CommonCore are now, but what I want out of CommonCore. When I started teaching philosophy 50 years ago, I could count on the fact that every student who came out of California high school had Macbeth. So when we started talking about do perceptions come to me or from me, we could talk about Lady Macbeth, the blood on her hands. We had common references. By the time I finished teaching philosophy at MDC, we had as in common a few Star Trek reruns. Nothing could I count on. In history, mythology, there was nothing I could count on that my students would know. I believe, not just for in college teaching, I believe that for us as a nation, we need to have common references so that we can speak to each other, recognizing certain things. Can I tell a brief story?
Yes.
At Dunkirk, when the British were trapped, a commander managed to get out 3 short words that he sent home. But if not. Does that mean anything to you? Well, it's based on the biblical story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when the king says, either bow down or I'm going to toss you in the fiery furnace and your God save you then. And they answer, our God could save us, but if not, we will be it known to you, O king, we will not serve your gods or bow down. But if not meant, we will not surrender if the Germans get here first. And there's enough common knowledge, this is many, many years ago, of the Bible, King James Version, that this can be understood when it gets to a communication in London. We have nothing, as far as I can see, that counts as a common reference that we can understand across generations, across states, across places. That's what I want from a CommonCore, at least something that everybody knows and everybody can refer to.
Bev, I think you had a question.
I think the 2 things that bother me the most about current education are the narrowing of the curriculum and teaching to the test. What this does is destroy engagement of students. What's interesting? Not very much. There's no music, there's no art, there's nothing to engage students. So my question is, does the CommonCore make that worse? Does it make the teaching to the test even more? Or did the teaching to the test and the narrowing of the curriculum come before Race to the Top and No Child Left Behind? When did that fall? Who's responsible for that?
Teaching to the test, I really do think, is an experience of the past. And I say that in general, and my experience right now is over the county at large, and I have been in multiple districts and schools. I did live the years where there was the tendency and the penchant to teach to the test. And that was because of fear. And that's the one piece that was not okay with No Child Left Behind. We should have been, as leaders, as politicians, we should have been the grown-ups in the room that said anything done out of fear or oppression or fear of punishment will not create nor allow students and teachers and systems to blossom. I'm a little concerned when we talk in extremes. The extremes of no music, no art, no dance, no creative writing, no electives. I have, again, 2 kids in the public school system, and I want to do an, oh, by the way, we intentionally chose from grades K through 8 that they were in the private system. And why did I choose? Because that was foundational for us, but it was also foundational that they have a public school experience in their back pocket. They have everything, and they are in a high-need, high-challenged school. There is a value on music. There's a value on art. I'm going to tell you, between zip codes, that music and art might look different, but they're thriving, and I love it when they come home with their bugles and their drums and their actual art itself in drawing and painting and AP art. Let's go back to the testing piece. I don't believe that across the county and in schools that there is that teaching, that stagnant, columnized, straight, up and down teaching to the test. I do believe, and my caution with Paul, you're in a district, you're in a school within a district, but that doesn't paint the whole county. The experience of, I know in my schools, I walked into a classroom, I didn't tell anybody they had to have a specific instructional strategy. What I did was have a conversation with, talk to me about how that worked for you. Talk to me about how that was the best practice, knowing that you have 2 special education students and 10 English learners. And I respectfully listened. And I know best strategies. I know the research behind best strategies, and we together would chime in. And as a school, agree on what were some of the common strategies that work, just like I expect in a hospital. I don't expect, I expect doctors to have common practices that they agree on, have a baseline work. Not necessarily cure, but at least they work. So I'm a little concerned that we paint a county based on maybe your grandchild or my children. I think there's some really good things going on. I do agree with you that there needs to be common understandings and common expectations around what our children will know. We won't get there. We will not get there. We won't get to a common understanding of what children should read in secondary school, let's say, unless we have common standards. There's just no way.
My question is, of course all these things are important, but how do we do it without being homogenous?
Okay, the question is, how do you achieve the skills needed for all time without homogenization?
I'll make this brief. I think there is no recipe, there is no mandate for homogenization of instruction. There are those high standards, and that's where we have the highly skilled professionals and the highly skilled professionals that we need to support in how they do that in their individual classrooms and within their school systems. And their school system is their school, and the overarching system is their district. And wouldn't it be beautiful across the county if we had some strong held beliefs about what all the different ways to deliver high quality instruction, not homogenized. You can't have anything homogenized with kids. They're all different.
I have a fundamental question, and I'm really quite confused, so I'm going to take the prerogative as president to ask the question. It seems to me the issue is not having a common reference or a common core, it's how you get there. I have a granddaughter who answered her math questions correctly, but she did not use the Common Core method. So the question is, what's confusing to me, is there a method being required of the Common Core for teaching certain curriculum versus this broader understanding of common references and Common Core? So that's my question.
All right, so for example, in math, what we do now, before the kids would just do a calculation, 3 times 4 is 12. And now instead what we have to do is we go, we'll have a piece of paper with sections in it, 3 sections, and the first column will be 3 times 4 equals 12. Then the kids have to prove it in 3 different ways. They have to use some kind of a graph, bar graph, circle graph, pie graph, whatever. And then they have to write it. What did you just accomplish? So this is a big change from what we used to do. But I would contend that in the end, how successful is that? Because I agree with what you asked before, because a lot of the things that are pointed up to here as being important data have no bearing or relationship whatsoever with CommonCore. Many of our children aren't going to need the kind of math that I just explained to you. My children are 10 years old. In 8 years, they will graduate. A big focus right now for 5th graders is to prove with evidence, prove with evidence, prove with evidence. And my daughter just showed me that's like you know, you have Wi-Fi here, right? Anyway, if you know, I could go like this, I could go, and I've done this many times. I go, okay, Google, and I go, boom, okay, Google. I'll go, how many sheep are in New Zealand? I did this at home, I practiced before I came here. There are 39 million sheep in New Zealand. That's the evidence. So anyway, my point being, if you have to go all out like this, I'm not sure it's what our kids need, and it's imposed. That's what we have to do with the kids. And that's distracting to me in the classroom. The other thing I wrote real fast was, how does CommonCore affect me in the class? Here's how. I think the CommonCore is a curricular solution to a social problem. My kids need nurses. My kids need psychologists. My kids need wraparound services. In my class, I've had a child defecate. He defecates in his pants. I had a girl who has selective mutism. I didn't know what that was. She won't talk to adults. The conditions of many of the kids that are in, children of color, the poverty there is unimaginable. 50% of my kids, 40 to 50% of my kids set foot in a prisoner jail by age 10 to visit a family member. It's unbelievable, unbelievable. And so when CommonCore says that they're going to give access to everybody, no, that's the goal. The access comes with the financial component that has to go with it, and the money's going to get sucked out for computers. And the stuff the kids need, they're not going to get. They're not going to get. One last thing. My brother lives in Manhattan. He teaches music there. And he teaches in a private school. He teaches Woody Allen's daughter, okay? And so you know what they have in his class? My brother teaches chorus. He teaches voice. He teaches strings. He teaches on and on and on. They have French. They have Chinese. On and on and on. We don't have that. We don't have that. Because the wealthy people know that's what you need. And Bill Gates' kid isn't going to CommonCore school where it's just English and math. And it just makes me crazy. It makes me crazy.
Would you like to ask a question?
Well, I'd just like to pick up on a couple of points. One made by Mary that expressed a concern as an educator about the politicization of these educational movements, whether it's Race to the Top, CommonCore, so on. It seems that politics plays a big role in these movements that we see in education. And then the second point was one made by Paul that had to do with the money that's behind some of these movements, whether it's corporate greed or the privatization of certain aspects of public education. So here I am here's the question, as a parent, as a taxpayer, how do I reconcile what's going on in our public schools? Because quite likely know what happens at the end of the Obama administration. There's going to be a change. We won't be talking about CommonCore. We're going to be talking about the next wave, or the newest thing that comes along, as we did when there was a change from Bush to Obama, or Clinton to Bush, and so on. So as a taxpayer, as a parent, how do we reconcile where to go with these things? Because we're torn. We see our taxes going in one direction. We see our children thrust into a different approach in education, and at the same time, everything's being held accountable. So how do we reconcile that out there as the people on the street?
I think the best way as citizens for us to reconcile, first of all, there is no reconciliation of chaos and confusion and lack of understanding and access, and lack of access, lack of equity, lack of medical care to students' needs. I do believe Those are distinct differences, the CommonCore from medical needs and psychological needs and socio-emotional needs. I think what we have to do is be active, be well informed. The topic of the CommonCore is embedded with deep emotion. And we have to step back from the emotion and be engaged on the end game. And the end game is an educated citizen group, an educated nation, right? And a nation that can be successful. So I think we do have to get involved. And I find the involvement, I don't want to blame it all on hardworking parents. I'm sorry. They've got their issues and we need to help them out. But what about a community? We are a wealthy, rich community. How often do we really talk about education? How often do we show up at our districts and say, I'm not here to fight, I'm not here to argue, because they really don't need that. What they do need is, I'm here to support. So I think we need to be involved, we need to be active, we need to be engaged, and we need to be vocal. Stop the fighting at the highest levels. There are children that are missing years and years of coherent education, coherent, rigorous, aligned, sorry, Paul, education. And so I think we need to be active in our community. And I think that's the problem nationwide. We have all stepped back from the decisions that are being made. And I do think we've got to step back from the politics of it. Real stuff is happening in real schools. And good stuff is happening. I'd love to invite you, this is my last piece, take a day to walk through a few schools. Not with an edge or not trying to find something, but walk, say to the principal, I just want to visit. Can you show me your five best classrooms? And start with that. And then you can go back another day. Could you show me 5 that aren't your best? But I want to be inspired by your 5 best. She's going to show you, he or she will show you 3 times that, because it is happening. The community, the districts, the schools need us to be active in the political conversation around education.
If you weigh the questions that you just asked, and in the end you come out against CommonCore, then I would suggest to parents to opt out of testing, which is what they've done in huge numbers in New York, because they found it oppressive. The kids spend 6 weeks, they take pilot tests for which the schools get nothing. Pearson benefits financially from it, so parents can opt out. And that's one way to do it. But I was thinking, there's feeding streams into CommonCore. And some of them are very political, and I believe some of it is anti-teacher. It's anti-teacher. They want to help to defund teacher unions. They want to demonize teachers. There's a stream out there with No Child Left Behind. They want to privatize the schools. They want to charterize the schools. Like in Chicago, they want to break them up. And with CommonCore, that's still part of it. You're going to be evaluated. You're going to be evaluated. And sorry, like it or not, Carmel scores higher than Castroville does. And my kids aren't any less intelligent, but for the plethora of reasons and realities I told you before, it's not going to come out the same. And it's horrible. I have individuals that are stunningly brilliant. You know?
Well, I think we are well on our way to being well informed about CommonCore. There's still a lot of questions, and I want to thank both of our speakers very much for